We all make mistakes. It's just part of being human, right? The real question isn't if we're going to stumble, it's about how we relate to those stumbles when they happen. So in this explainer, we're going to explore a totally different way of seeing our imperfections. What if they aren't obstacles to avoid, but actually the very soil our wisdom grows from? So let's just dive right in with a pretty big question. Think about how much energy we spend trying not to make mistakes. It's a lot. But what if we've been looking at this whole thing completely backwards? What if every single misstep isn't actually proof that we've failed, but instead it's an essential, maybe even an expected ingredient for our own growth? Yeah, let's really dig into that. Okay, so to help us explore this, we're going to lean on one central metaphor. It's a really simple but powerful one, the idea that wisdom grows out of a very specific kind of soil. And here it is. The core idea is that our mistakes are that soil of wisdom. They aren't the weeds we need to pull out of the garden. No, they're the rich, fertile ground that makes real growth and maturity even possible in the first place. Now, I know that can sound a little abstract. So to make it more concrete, and to help us start letting go of all that judgment we usually heap on ourselves, let's look at this through a really powerful everyday analogy. Just picture a little toddler who's learning to walk, right? They pull themselves up on the coffee table. They take that first wobbly step and inevitably, they fall down. We've all seen it happen. But here's the key part. Think about how a loving parent reacts. They don't scold the kid for falling, do they? Of course not. They don't see it as a failure at all. In fact, they expect it. They know falling down is just a necessary, normal part of learning how to walk. And this is exactly the invitation for us, to see our own stumbles in that same light, as an expected and essential part of our own development. Okay, so if we accept that mistakes are the soil, how does that soil actually turn into wisdom? Let's get into the nitty-gritty of how this process really works. Well, it's not just random chance. It turns out there are three really specific ways that our mistakes help cultivate wisdom. First, they teach us balance and direction. Second, they give us what we call a sacred pause. And third, they are absolutely crucial for building real, true integrity. So let's break down that first one. Think back to the toddler. Every single fall literally teaches them something new about balance. And it's the exact same for us. Our mistakes teach us about our own alignment. Taking a wrong turn isn't just a failure. It's actually crucial information that shows us the right direction. Suddenly, our missteps aren't a final judgment. They're just data. All right, number 2 is the sacred pause. When we mess up and face the consequences, our go-to reaction is often to feel like we're being punished. But this way of thinking offers a totally different perspective. What if that correction is actually grace at work? What if it's a loving invitation to just stop, reflect on where we are, and consciously choose our next move? The whole shift is from I'm being punished to I am being raised. It's about formation, not failure. And that brings us to the third point, building true integrity. And this isn't just some nice idea. It's something that gets forged in the fire of real life. Our mistakes create these real-world tests. They give us opportunities to learn how to hold someone's trust, how to choose responsibility over just reacting, and how to develop what we call upright living, which is really just a life built on conscious, aligned choices. So after all this, tending the soil, learning from our falls, what's the result? What's the harvest? Let's take a look at the incredible character strengths that start to show up when we really embrace this process. And the results are, well, they're pretty profound. Instead of being brittle and defensive, we start to develop this deep, flexible resilience. Instead of reacting impulsively, we find we have this capacity for real grace under pressure. And maybe the most important piece of all is that we start to build an authentic internal authority. And just so we're clear on what that means, internal authority is really just the capacity to trust your own hard-won wisdom. It's that quiet, steady, inner knowing. And here's the thing. It doesn't come from being perfect, not at all. It comes from having stumbled, from having learned, and from integrating all those lessons into the very fiber of who you are. Okay, let's bring this all back to you. How can you actually apply this idea and start, tending your own garden of wisdom in a really practical way? So here's a simple reflection prompt for you. Go ahead and think about a recent mistake, maybe one that still stings a little bit, and then just ask yourself, how can I reframe this? What was the lesson here about balance?
What new direction did that wrong turn actually point me in? Try to really see it as soil for your own growth.
And to make it even more real, here's a little micro practice you can try. The very next time you stumble, and it will happen, in that tiny moment right before the inner critic starts yelling, just pause. Take one deep breath and quietly say to yourself, I am being raised. Just notice what that does. See how it can shift your whole perspective away from shame and toward formation. So we'll leave you with this. This whole idea of embracing imperfection, it's not a one and done decision, right? It's an ongoing practice. It's about cultivation. So the real question for all of us is, how are you going to choose to tend to your soil today?